right, gold bugs and gold bulls. Let's talk about the precious metal markets. Of course, last week was quite a week for gold bugs, right? July 12th, I think, is the day that a lot of people will remember. We had major pops in gold and also silver. Here you can see a picture of the price action on July 14th, 16th, and 17th. But yeah, what's happening, right, in the gold markets? Where are we going next? And is this the big move for gold? And I wrote this article, it's now the time for gold to shine. And, you can read about the fundamentals, of course, going forward on why people like gold in general. We're talking about nominal interest rates, the real interest rates, because you got to remember, gold yields nothing. And if you look at the bond market with yields, now sort of declining, and then you factor in the rate of inflation, is that real yield positive or negative? If it's positive, then more money is going to run into bonds, and it's not necessarily great for gold. If it is negative, then you're not really making any money, holding bonds when you factor in inflation, which tends to be positive for the gold market. So, the markets are now pricing in, either you're going to look at interest rates, if they're going to rise, or if they're going to go lower. And then you've got to also look at the rate of inflation, because if bond yields remain high and that rate of inflation is coming lower, then there's a higher chance that, the bonds are going to be remaining positive rates of return, which tends to be, as I said, negative for gold. So do, factor that in when you're looking at the gold markets. I talk about that a lot in this article. But I do want to mention two major things, right? We're going to look at the gold charts, but we got to talk about the dollar, and we got to talk about other gold markets. I think that's very key to look at this recent move. But of course, why did all this happen, right? What came out on that week? Well, we got news that the US CPI came in lower than expected, which really impacted that US dollar chart, right? It broke down, major continuation of that move lower. We even closed below 100 on the DXY, on the US dollar index, which, major psychological support zone. So we are below 100. It looks like the dollar is going to continue to move down. But this happened, as I said, US CPI came in lower than expected. And, now the markets are pricing in this whole idea of, okay, the Fed is now close to ending their rate hikes. Just a little bit before that, you got to also remember that US NFP, which came out on the first week of July, the employment numbers came in lower than expected when, job data has been so hot for the past few months. And Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve have been saying, what economic slowdown are you guys talking about? These employment data keep coming out strong, and the labor market is, robust and strong. So as long as that happens, there's no slowdown, and we can continue to raise interest rates. But we got, a weaker than expected NFP data. We got now lower CPI. So now the market is really thinking that, okay, the Fed is literally very close to, ending their rate hike policy. Of course, though, the July Fed futures is already pricing in a 25 basis point rate hike in this month. I believe the meeting's on July, 26th, which is a Wednesday. So that is coming, where we expect the Fed will rate hikes. But then from there, the market is now expecting the Fed to basically turn quite dovish and maybe just say, hey, we're probably near the end of this rate hike cycle. Markets loved it. As I said, gold loved it. And it came down to this chart here, the US dollar chart, pricing in all that fundamental data about interest rates, about the labor markets, about CPI, and what the Fed is going to do next. And as you guys know, there's a negative correlation between the dollar and gold. When the dollar drops, gold rises, vice versa. A lot of people call gold the anti-dollar, or the anti-dollar, sorry. And I think that this move is key, right? This breakdown here in the dollar is key for the move in gold versus the US dollar. If you remember a video that I made a couple of weeks before, we talked about this breakdown in gold actually below 1940 We created a bit of a head and shoulder technical pattern here. We closed back below this weekly trend line, our previous higher low, which was acting as support. And I said, as long as that happens, it doesn't look too good for gold, because if we remain below 1940, there is a possibility that we can move below to 1820. But as you can see, on that retest of 1940, the buyers finally beat the bears, and we managed to eke out a close back above 1940, largely thanks to that CPI data and the weakness in the US dollar. And you can see here, because of that, this breakdown has become a false breakdown. We're sort of back now on a bullish stance here. We are above this trend line. We've closed back above 1940, as I said, and now going forward, we're going to watch to see if gold, which is doing its retest right now and can continue higher to retest the previous record highs here around that 2060 zone, which a lot of people have been saying was a triple top pattern. But there is a possibility that gold can retest those zones once again and potentially even break out into new record highs against gold, against the US dollar, depending if that dollar continues to drop lower. So major zone here that has been broken. We like gold now back above 1940, what the bulls wanted to see. And now to play this going forward, I would just wait to see this lower high here around the 1960 zone be taken out to continue the move higher, and to see, if the bulls will step in and bid up the price here on the retest, which, you are actually seeing with today's daily candle. But is this the big gold move that we've all been waiting for? If you are, trading just gold against the US dollar, I think things are looking quite nicely, or looking quite good, because of all the technicals and the fundamentals and what's going on the chart of the US dollar. But I want to take a look at other gold. Gold against the Australian dollar. Gold against the Canadian rupee. Okay, this one's rising. Gold against the Swiss franc. See that. Gold against the euro. See that. Gold against the British pound. See this. Well, I think gold against the yen is a bit different, but actually it has broken down now here as well. So if you were expecting, or if you wanted to see a major gold move, right, like an actual reason for gold to go higher, or like this being the big case to go gold for long-term investment, you would expect to see gold to rise against all these other currencies. So this move, I would say, is not necessarily a bullish gold move. This is more of a dollar down move, and gold, rising or appreciating against the US dollar. So I just want to caution, the gold bulls regarding this. Look at all these other charts, and I think that the move that we've seen recently isn't necessarily the big move for gold that we've all been expecting, based on a confidence crisis with interest rate, with government, with central banks, and the fiat currency. I think that this move is just, dominantly, well, not dominantly, it is just a move reacting to the drop in the US dollar. And again, I do recommend you take a look at my article as well, because there is, another major gold news coming up in August. Apparently, the BRICS nations are planning to introduce trading currency which is backed by gold. This was confirmed by Russian media this month, and apparently it's going to be unveiled in the BRICS summit in South Africa, and that could be, a major fundamental thing or fundamental news for gold as a whole, right? The entire gold market to move up, because you might see those central banks decide to stock up on more gold, and maybe other nations around the world saying, okay, if we want to play with that system, we might need to buy some gold as well. And you're already hearing news about this, about nations now trying to repatriate their gold back from US vaults and British vaults as well. So, that's the news that I would be sort of looking at. I would be looking at news that would impact the entire gold market, and I want to see gold against these other fiats rise. But as I said, you're not seeing that. You're only seeing gold here rise against, or breakout here against, that US dollar. So, in summary, it is a dollar down move we are seeing here, which is seeing gold and, all the other fiat currencies as well, right? If you are a forex trader who trades, euro, US dollar, British pound, US dollar, you can see that the dollar is depreciating against all these other currencies as well. So it's making very similar moves to what is happening here on gold as well. But this just not, to me, it's not that big gold move that we are all expecting. And I would be more interested to, I would be, again, I don't want to put a date on things, but I think around fall of this year, just to see the reaction after this BRICS news as well. I think fall of this year is where I would be watching keenly if I'm a major gold bull to see what the gold markets will do as a whole. But as I said, for more information on that, be sure to take a look at my article that's up here on Equity Guru. If you are a gold bull, I'd like to know in the comments below. Let me know where you think gold is going, and do you think gold against the US dollar here is going to break out against all-time record highs, or do you think the dollar is going to reverse and we see a bit of a decline here in gold itself? Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more technical analysis videos in the future ahead. And yeah, I'll catch you guys all in the next chart attack video.